Hello, hello, Leo.
Hello, pleasure to be here.
Here's Morten Toft from Denmark. To you that don't know me, I live in Denmark, and I will be today's host. And today I am together with Leo, and soon you will introduce yourself, Leo. I think you are the best to introduce yourself. But I also have to say to the audience and to you that English is not my first language. So maybe I will make some mistakes. And if you're the personality type that always look for mistakes, sorry, you will probably find some mistakes. But part of our discussion potentially will also be that we have to allow mistakes to happen, Leo. Don't you think we will come into that in our discussion?
Very much so. And by the way, your English is certainly much better than my Danish. So I think we're fair.
Okay. So Leo, let's jump into our little interview here. Actually, my first question is going a little bit behind the name Leo. Who is Leo? A little bit about your upbringing, your background, and what have led you to do what you do today, please.
Wow, big question.
Yeah.
So I grew up actually in the Boston area, and it grew up a big Boston sports fan, Boston Red Sox, Celtics, Bruins, Patriots, all of that. Was very involved in a lot of different things, whether it was sports or music or art or all of it, and just really tried to soak up as much as I possibly could. I ended up going to college in Florida, basically to kind of escape the New England weather for a little while. And I played a bit of tennis when I was in college in Florida. Later returned back home to New England, spent the better part of my career in corporate communications, both the agency and the client sides of the business. But it was during that time, for many years, I had always wanted to get my master's degree. It was something that was really important to me. And I've always valued education in a big way. And for me, the formal education has been a real gate opener for me in so many respects. So I finally found the program that I was interested in that really spoke to me. And it was a Master of Arts in Strategic Communication and Leadership program at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. And what was interesting was I was part of a learning team. And it was the first time I'd ever really been part of something that one would call collaborative learning. Earlier in my life, in high school and all, it was all about, the teacher and the individual student and shielding your paper from other kids and nobody's copying off each other and things like that. So collaborative learning may have been regarded as cheating back when I was younger. But here I am in this environment, seeing how all these amazing people that I got to meet and how we learned from one another and how incredibly powerful and effective that was. And for me, that launched, a whole new career in so many respects now with what I do today, which is I'm a founder and managing partner of a company called Peernovation. And what I do is I take what those learning teams and what peer advisory groups for CEOs and key executives do so brilliantly and have been for decades. And I not only help those groups perform at an even higher level, but I also bring those principles into companies today. And alongside that, I'm an adjunct professor for Rutgers University. I've been an adjunct professor for about 15 years now between Seton Hall and Rutgers. And I'm also an opinion columnist and external advisory board member for CEOWORLD magazine. So I stay busy. I have a lot of fun. I enjoy the communication space very much, but I'm particularly passionate about what we can do if we do it together.
Yeah. And you have also written a couple of books, and one of them is about peer groups, correct?
3 books. The first one is called The Power of Peers, about peer groups. The second book is called What Anyone Can Do, which actually steps outside of the formal peer groups and just looks at all of the people who surround us in our lives. And if we did a better job of enlisting and engaging their support, they could help us, I think, achieve a lot more of what we're looking for in our lives. And then finally, there's Peernovation, and the subtitle being What Peer Advisory Groups Can Teach Us About Building High-Performing Teams. And that essentially takes the original models from the first book, shows how they've evolved, talks about the prevailing challenges that groups have, but also makes it very clear about how to take, again, what these peer groups do so well and how to really apply these to your teams. And I think for today's companies, the importance and value of their teams really being highly effective and collaborative has never been more important.
And if you could say a little bit about what is your driving force personally, what is your values and what is your purpose? I know, again, it can be a big question, but let's hear.
I want to change the world by getting people to work together more effectively. I think all too often, as you know, there's a lot of self-help books out there.
Yeah.
And I think all too often people interpret self-help as buy your self-help. Yeah. And that isn't what it is at all. The reality is that, and I've talked to countless very successful people about this, and I've asked every one of them, did you become successful alone? And of course, they laugh at the notion. Of course not. We need to, I think, do a better job of enlisting and engaging the support of others, to see that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's an act of resourcefulness. And that what we can do together is incredibly powerful. And I see this in groups, I see it in teams. And I think the more that we can embrace that, the more that we can, truly understand and practice this idea of working together, I think what we can accomplish is extraordinary. So my passion is very much around that, because I see it time and time again. I've conducted hundreds and hundreds of workshops for peer advisory groups and companies, and there isn't a time where I haven't seen it work, where I haven't seen it make a difference, whether it's a lower performing group or team or a very high performing group or team. In fact, usually the higher performers are the ones that even see greater opportunities for themselves to improve.
So what I hear is we have to be aware about who is the people that we are around, because
absolutely,
it's very, very important, both in private life and in business, who we are together with. Is that how
who you surround yourself with matters? It really does. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, but do we always have to be together with people that are like ourselves? Because you and I, we know that we have some common values, and we have a common ideas about the innovation and other things. But what do you say to people that are different than us?
Oh my goodness, no, I think it's really important to spend time with people who have different perspectives, different experiences, different ways of looking and seeing at the world. That's how we learn and grow. Yeah. And I think the more that we engage in those conversations from the perspective of curiosity and learning, as opposed to trying to get into debate and argument and, get into who's right and who isn't and all this other stuff, I think that's also a healthy practice as well. And I think the more that we kind of understand that, someone may present something that you've never heard of before, you feel is 100% opposite from how you might view it, instead of trying to get into an argument about it or think that that person's wrong, dig deeper and ask questions and explore where they're coming from and why or how their experiences have informed the way they see things. And I think there's a great deal to be learned when we do that.
And that's actually what creates the high performance teams, that we have this, understanding about each person in a team and how we can be different. And that way we can really work together with the, high goals and reach them. Great.
Yeah, I definitely find that the better that people get to know one another, not just as coworkers or co-team members, but as human beings, the more we can kind of connect with people and understand who they are and understand their story. That doesn't mean we're going to agree with them all the time, but we can certainly have a greater understanding of their viewpoint and how they see the world.
I wonder, I know you do a lot of work in other countries, but if you should come up with some role models, company role models or CEO role models that you really think do a fantastic job, who would you actually mention?
Well, there's a lot of really great people out there. I think about when I look at CEOs. There was a CEO of a company that I worked for called Mullen Lowe. It's a global advertising agency headquartered out of Boston. His name was Joe Grimaldi. And Joe Grimaldi was an incredible CEO. He was one of those people that was a part of the team, not apart from it. He was very engaged, but in a way that came from a place of real caring. And he was passionate about bringing a collection of people together who were committed to creating the best advertising in the world. And he both challenged us and encouraged us and supported us in that effort. And I remember one particular story where we had a major pitch to a client, and he was there at the meeting, of course, spoke there. And at the end, he got a phone call that kind of pulled him away from everyone as we're kind of packing up and leaving and getting on a flight. This was from New York to Boston at the time. And I remember getting home that night and having an email from him who basically said, look, I just want to thank everyone for the incredible job everyone did today and all that. He said, I got pulled away and very sorry about that. And I feel like I failed you as your chief encouragement officer today. And I thought, wow, it's so extraordinary. And these are the kinds of things that we remember too, when we work with people in terms of how they make us feel. I think about certain scholars that I've come in touch with, Jim Kouzes, who is co-author of the Leadership Challenge, which I think is one of the, clearly seminal leadership books ever written. It's in its 7th edition right now. It's available, I think, last count. They've sold millions of copies in like 22 countries around the world. It's just an extraordinary, but everything that's in that book, when you spend time with Jim Kouzes, that is who he is to his core. There's nothing, manufactured about that. And I think it's extraordinary. Linda Darling Hammond, one of the top education scholars in the world out of Stanford University, another person who is so unbelievably accomplished. She has over 500 publications with her name on it. And yet, she, as much as she is in command of the subject matter like no other, she has an incredible humility and curiosity and willingness to learn. So I could go on and on. I mean, there's a lot of great people out there that I think, one common denominator, though, I think, is that these people remain students of their work, students of life, all throughout their life.
Yeah.
They don't feel themselves as the expert or anything. That they certainly don't shy away from it. If someone calls them an expert, I think that's fine. But I think they remain curious and they're constantly learning and growing, and it's really exciting to see.
And they're probably also in some CEO peer groups where they can share and grow together, but that's another question. I also hear that you say that the role models are like healthy role models that walk the talk. They are authentic. What they say is also what they do. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, when you look at the Leadership Challenge, there are 5 practices of leadership, and one of them is called Model the Way.
Yeah.
And it's really making sure that, you can't say one thing and it can't be a do as I say, not as I do. You've got to be right in there with them, which is why being a part of the team instead of being apart from it is so important, because you have greater opportunities to model the very behaviors that underscore the values that are driving, any business.
So my next question was actually, what is your recipe for success? Again, a big question, but what we have just talked about is part of the recipe, correct? And can you expand a little bit about your success recipe, if there is a success recipe?
So I might put it in one of the things that we found common to high-performing peer advisory groups and to high-performing teams in general is they have what we call a robust learning achieving cycle. So, and that learning achieving cycle consists of learning, sharing, applying, achieving, and celebrating. which then drives that continuous learning, sharing, applying, achieving, celebrating. And the reason I say that is because if we are committed to learning, what we know is that we learn better when we learn together. So when we share that learning among one another, that deepens our understanding of whatever it is we're doing. But by the same token, when we work together to do that, we also give one another the confidence, the courage, and the encouragement to try and apply things that we've learned. And when we do that, even if there's some trial and error, once we achieve some success at doing that, and then we celebrate that win, it inspires us to do more of it. And I think people who, and if you put this in the context of, let's say, a sports team, for example.
Yeah.
If you think about any organization in the world who is either winning championships or pretty consistently always in the playoffs, they're always in the top tier. They are just winning organizations. Now, they may use different language around this, but the reality in practice is that none of them see winning the championship as their goal. They really don't. Their goal is that learning achieving cycle I'm talking about. How do we get better every day? How do we make sure that we go to practice? We have that attention to detail. We're better tomorrow than we were the day before, and it's a constant continuous improvement. They know that if they commit to that, if they commit to what it takes to be great, then they will be rewarded with championships. The championships for them are the reward. Their goal is how do we get better? And so for me, when I see sports teams do it, when I see companies do it, when people are committed to that level and they truly love, the process in that regard. And I think MullenLowe would be a great example. Those folks are all about the work. They will tell you that good work tells you what a product does and why you should buy it. Great work conveys what a brand stands for and invites you to share in its beliefs. It's just they play on a different level, and there's a commitment to what it takes, the level of preparedness, the level of commitment, and everything that goes into the work. How they challenge one another in a way that isn't fighting each other; it's fighting for the best idea. Yeah. Now you're talking, right? That's what really makes for, I think, the best of the best. Whether again it's in business, sports, the arts, any aspect of life.
I hear you also here talking about cause and effect, and instead of focusing on the effect, focusing on the cause that actually create the effect. So when we focus on the effect or the cause, and the cause how do you see? Is that what we're talking about? Cause and effect here?
In many respects, absolutely. It's funny, about 6-7 months ago, I delivered a talk in Reno, Nevada. And in Reno, Nevada, they have a lot of casinos, and there's a lot of poker and a lot of gambling and all of that being done there. So I felt it was important to maybe connect with a bit of a story around that. And I basically said that if you were playing cards, if you were at a poker table and you had a stack of chips and you wanted that stack of chips to grow, what do you pay attention to? Do you stare at your chips or do you pay attention to your cards? Pretty clear what you need to do, because if you keep staring at those chips, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You'll watch that pile go down is what's going to happen. But if you actually do what it takes to play the cards, to play the people around the table, to pay attention to what it takes to make that chip pile do what you'd like it to do, then you're in the game. Again, cause and effect. Yeah. You start focused on the chip pile, or you start just only staring at your Excel spreadsheet. So you only start looking at that end goal without any real true appreciation and love for what it takes to make things possible. You're going to have a difficult time.
But don't you think, Leo, that this is one of the big dilemmas or issues in business, but also in private life, that we get focused on the on the wrong, if there's something called wrong thing. We focus more on the on this looking at the goals and not the journey.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, let me give you a quick story, if you don't mind, that I think will kind of bring this right to. Many years ago, because my daughters are in their 30s right now, but about 20 years ago, probably, they must have been maybe 11 or 12. They wanted to climb their first mountain peak. And they said, Dad, we want to go climb a mountain. I said, great. Here are the things you got to do to prepare. And a couple of weeks later, we set off early on a Saturday morning. It was about 6 a.m. because you want to get off the top of a mountain before afternoon thunderstorms come in. So you get an early start, you do what you need to do. So sure enough, we get climbing, we get above the tree line. What happens? Climb gets steeper, the air gets thinner, gets a little tougher. You start staring at that peak is what starts to happen.
Yeah.
You climb for a while, and anyone who's ever done this will know what I'm talking about. That you climb for a little while, you stare at the peak. You climb for a little while more, and then you look up at the peak again, and you're thinking, this is not getting any closer at all. So in addition to it becoming physically more difficult, it's emotionally demoralizing because you don't feel like you're making any progress. So there was a point in the climb where the girls start saying, hey, Dad, I think the view's pretty good from here. And I'm like, okay. And then the other one says, there's a little puff of white cloud up near the peak. And they said, Dad, is that weather coming in? I said, no, I think we're okay. Of course, I'm not taking the hint, right? So finally, the two of them look at each other and they finally said to me, hey, you know what? This has been great, but we're not making any progress toward that peak and we're exhausted. And we're just like, hey, why don't we maybe call it a day? And I said, tell you what, I said, why don't we take 10 more minutes? Let's kind of mark where we are. And they weren't quite sure why I was saying this. And it was a big rock, and it was actually this large bush basically growing out of it. And I said, let's mark wheel, let's climb 10 more minutes. And after 10 more minutes, if you guys are done, no questions asked, we're coming off the mountain, okay? Deal. We climbed the 10 minutes to the second. They're like, okay, we're done now. They looked up at the peak, first thing they did, and they said, see, it doesn't look any closer than it was 10 minutes ago. I said, look behind you. Now they look behind them and they see that bush is the tiniest little dot in the landscape. They were floored by how far they had come and the progress they had made. And with that day, they climbed another 10 minutes, they climbed another 15 minutes, kept putting one foot in front of the other. Next thing you know, they summited that day. And what a feeling for them of incredible accomplishment in doing that. But it was born out of reframing this idea of keeping your eye on the prize is ridiculous advice in my view.
Yeah.
Have the goal in mind, sure, but
Yeah.
you're going to keep staring at it and focus on it without having an appreciation for the progress you're making and how far you're coming and celebrating those small wins along the way. You're going to have a very difficult time. I think the more we can celebrate those small wins, the more likely we are to achieve the larger goals far more often. And I think that becomes a key in how we do this in business or anywhere else. Another quick example in business would be, oftentimes we're working into the late afternoon and maybe into the evening and we're on some big project. We have no hope of finishing by the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month, but we're slogging away and it gets late, we get exhausted and we work until we just can't work anymore and we shut our laptop. We don't feel that great. And then the next thing you know, we're trying to figure out, we pick up where we left off and we keep going. What I suggest to people all the time is pick a stopping point and declare victory. Celebrate that. This was my goal today. I got there done. I'm going to declare victory. I'm going to be in control of the work instead of the work being in control of me. I'm going to get up the next morning and say, okay, now I know exactly where I'm going to pick up, boom. And then I'm going to set my next goal for the next day. Again, these are the kinds of things that if we can frame it, for ourselves even, it's not even celebrating among a whole big group of people. Sometimes it's just internal, you can be alone at your own computer and celebrate those wins. And I think that can be the real difference, especially when it comes to inspiring a team toward those larger goals.
I don't know, have you seen the movie called Peaceful Warrior with Nick Nolte playing the wise man? Or if you have not, or
okay.
Also,
I don't believe so. Please, yeah.
Yeah, that's a fantastic movie. It's just a suggestion that you, if you have not seen it, or the audience, then see it.
I will add it to my movie list. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Sure.
And that is, we have talked about high performance teams. We have talked about peer groups. But if you again should define the recipe for creating a high performance teams, what will you say then?
So the recipe, and certainly the one I use again, and it's born out of what peer advisory groups do so well, is when I talk about that learning achieving cycle, there's also an element of things called intentional and collateral learning. Intentional learning basically is nothing more than taking in content in a very intentional way and doing something with it or not. Collateral learning, which basically comes from John Dewey in the 1930s, is what you learn from how you learn. So when you engage one another and you have to be present and you learn how to listen and ask precise questions and don't rush to judgment or make assumptions or jump to conclusions, you start to become very valuable to one another in that regard in a group situation, and you can take those things and apply it to your team. But when I talk about the learning achieving cycle or that intentional and collateral learning, none of that happens by just putting a bunch of people in a room and hoping for the best. So what I tend to do is I use a 5-factor framework called the right people. Okay, do we have all the right people in this group or on this team as we define it for one another? Do we enjoy psychological safety? Can we be open and vulnerable with one another? Do we give each other the benefit of the doubt? Do we trust intent, right? And are we able to have open, honest conversations that are rooted in our purpose and our values? Are we as productive as we can be? Are we accountable to one another to the degree that we need to be? At Mullen Lowe, for example, I worked there, and when we had large pitch meetings, for example, everyone came incredibly well prepared to those meetings, not to impress their boss because there was KPIs associated with it. They did it because everyone else in that room was going to bring their A game, and you wanted to make sure that in service of what we cared about, which was creating the best advertising in the world, that we show up ready to go. So I think that accountability among one another becomes important. And then, of course, from the leadership perspective, I think we've certainly found with groups, and I think is true for a lot of teams as well, that some element of servant leadership, a leader who's not interested in having the team make the leader look good, but how the leader can help the team be successful. With that leader being a part of the team versus apart from it, but by the same token, always serving as the steward of those other 4 factors, right? Of right people, psychological safety, productivity, and accountability. When you can be both intentional about those 5 factors and create clarity among one another about exactly what you expect of yourself and one another and any new person that comes to join this group or team, that to me becomes a real winning formula for teams. And also with the recognition that it's an ongoing process. It's not like you have these conversations and you check off the box and you say, okay, we're done with that now we can move on. It's a constant communication, constant clarity, and really being attentive, I think, to the importance and value of those 5 factors. So that's how I would kind of frame that.
I also believe then we need a high level of honesty in the team to actually say yes and no when we really have a yes and no, and be aware to communicate honestly where they are in the work and what they do and so on. So honesty must be also one of the key elements.
No doubt, and it's a product of feeling psychologically safe.
Yeah,
that you can be open, that you can be honest, and we can have conversations again that are about the work. It's not a commentary on you. It's not, you know what I mean? We're here to do something together. And to your point, you're going to benefit from having diversity on a team. You're going to benefit from having different voices who can contribute different perspectives, and how important and valuable that is. And the more that we listen to one another and work together, I think the more powerful we can become.
Back to my beginning with mistakes, being afraid of doing mistakes. That's right. That's not a good thing in a high-performing team, that we are looking for mistakes. Actually, we should learn from the mistakes and grow from the mistakes, correct?
Absolutely. That is fundamental to this, not being afraid to ask what you think is the stupid question, put it out there, because other people have the question too. It's just who has the courage to ask it. And but admitting mistakes is very important as well. And that's just true for the leader also. And for the leader to model the way, like we talked about. Once the leader actually is capable of showing some vulnerability in that regard, it makes it okay. It gives some tacit permission for others that, you know what, none of us is perfect. So let's learn from what we do and move on.
So Leo, we have been around a couple of things in this talk. And I know we could continue for a long time, but I also think we should leave it as a little taster, a little appetizer. And then I will ask you if people would like to have more information or get in contact with you. I think in this message, when we send it out, there will be information about how they can get in contact with you. Do you have something you will say here in the end about how they can go to the next level?
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from you, by the way. Certainly on my LinkedIn, Leo Bottary, go to my LinkedIn profile, send me a message, we can connect there. You can go to my website at leobottary.com, where you can, first of all, there's a lot of content. There is months worth of content that is available for you, all for free for anyone who wants to access it and is looking to read it. But if you are interested in talking about any of it or connecting with me, or if you're interested in how you might bring Peernovation to your group or team, you can certainly reach out to me there or through LinkedIn. I think would be the two best ways. But I'd love to hear from you. It'd be great.
And Leo, thank you so much for the talk. I'm really grateful for being able to have this talk, but you also have to know I'm grateful to have you in my network and the way that we actually can share things, you and I. You need to know that. Thank you so much for sharing, Leo. And yeah, I really, I'm happy.
Me too. And thank you very, very much. And likewise, it's wonderful now to have you certainly as part of my circle as well. So I appreciate that.
So should we say goodbye to the audience and then continue the day?